You are on the channel Military Reporter, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine as of February 27, 2025. A tremendous amount of events have happened today, so let's get started. Today is February 27th, and it's the last day before the possible signing of a historic agreement between Ukraine and the United States on rare earth metals. And of course, due to the fact that today is actually the last day before these events, we are getting a lot of different information and statements. As usual in such situations, all the points that could not be settled during the various rounds of negotiations are now coming out. For example, Zelensky says that he is not ready to sign any agreements, neither with the United States of America, nor with France, nor with Great Britain, nor with anyone. The only condition under which he will agree to sign these agreements is the provision of specific security guarantees. Without security guarantees, Zelensky is not going to sign anything. It is also reported today that Zelensky does not intend to return to anyone any money that was allocated to Ukraine during the special military operation. At least, the funds that were given out as grants will not be paid. There is an important distinction here. The United States provided almost all of its aid to Ukraine in the form of grants, whereas the European Union initially allocated funds in the form of loans. Therefore, the European Union is likely to get its money unless there are any unforeseen circumstances. As for security guarantees, they are being seriously negotiated. Zelensky, by the way, is no longer on the territory of Ukraine at the moment. Now he is in Ireland, where he is waiting for the moment when he will be called. Why is he doing this? Because it is not he who is in the Oval Office of the White House, but the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Keir Starmer. He is scheduled to meet with Trump just today to discuss security guarantees. Let me remind you that since the beginning of this week, Macron flew in with Donald Trump on a working visit, who, like Keir Starmer, is trying to convince Trump to continue to support Ukraine. However, the latest formula offered by Starmer and Macron is as follows. Trump, you don't want to give security guarantees to Ukraine? Okay, we accept that. But we want you and the US to give security guarantees to the peacekeeping force represented by France and the United Kingdom. That will be enough. That is, if Trump doesn't want to give guarantees to Ukraine, he should at least give them to European peacekeeping troops. After all, if the conflict stops and negotiations begin, and the Russian side takes advantage of this to rearm and prepare a new offensive, then in this case the Russian Federation can also strike the peacekeeping contingent that will be along the entire line of contact. So Europe needs guarantees that the US will protect their peacekeepers. If Trump agrees to provide European troops with these security guarantees, Zelensky will most likely be invited and told, "That's it, we've agreed with Trump, come, the guarantees will be there." In this case, Zelensky will fly to the US tomorrow to sign the documents with Donald Trump. If security guarantees are not provided, Ukraine is likely to try to move out of the deal. Perhaps Trump will claim that Zelensky refused to come and they will not sign the agreement at the ministerial level, as the signature of the head of state is needed. In such a case, Zelensky might even fly up to the US, but turn around and go back towards Ukraine to participate in the next rounds of negotiations. Thus, the fateful issue of security guarantees is now being decided. And this is an extremely important moment, because if Trump gives these guarantees to the countries of Europe, France and the UK, they will no longer have to wait for any ceasefire, and the situation may begin to develop as unpredictably as possible. But while the talks are going on in Washington, there are parallel talks going on in Turkey as well. By the time this video was recorded, they had already ended. They lasted at least 6 hours and were held between representatives of the Russian Federation and representatives of the United States. Sources say that the main topic of these talks was the resumption of work of diplomatic missions. However, apparently, given the fact that negotiations are going on in parallel in the US, and Zelensky is in Ireland and the British Prime Minister is in the White House, it can be assumed that the whole process is going on online. All sides are trying to find the last formula, the last agreement that will satisfy absolutely everyone. Again, there is much talk today about security guarantees and a European contingent on Ukrainian territory. Moscow has already spoken out on this matter as well. Today, Sergei Lavrov said clearly and precisely that there can be no European troops, no NATO troops, no non-Ukrainian troops on Ukrainian territory at all. The Ukrainian army must be of minimal size, and only under such conditions is the Russian Federation ready to sign an agreement with Ukraine and Western countries. That is, you and I can see that there is no agreement as such. And everything suggests that perhaps no one will sign anything tomorrow. Now let's move on to the line of contact, where a lot of important information is coming from. We will start today with the Zaporizhia direction. Let me remind you that, according to our position, our opinion, in case the negotiation process comes to its logical conclusion, i.e. the possible signing of a certain document between Western countries, the Russian Federation, the European Union, the United States and Ukraine, it is at that moment or a few weeks before it that the Ukrainian side can throw all its forces to take control of the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. This will improve its position both from a negotiating point of view and in general in economic terms after the end of the conflict. Apparently, preparations for this moment are already underway. Today, Russian sources published a video in which reconnaissance activities managed to identify a large group of FPV operators, drone operators of the Ukrainian armed forces. This concentration of Ukrainian troops was hit by a missile strike using a cluster warhead. According to the author of the video and Russian sources, during this strike the AFU suffered significant losses, up to 100 people, among whom could be not only operators, but also support personnel. Let me also remind you that since February there has been high activity on this section of the front. Back in early February, the IAEA team tried to conduct a rotation at the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, and everything was ready on the part of the Russian Federation. IAEA inspectors arrived, and movement towards the nuclear plant began. However, according to Russian sources, artillery and mortar strikes and drone attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces began on this convoy, and the rotation was disrupted. We see that a process is underway to prevent the replacement of personnel at this nuclear power plant, although its goals remain unclear. I would also like to remind you that during this month it has been repeatedly reported that the Russian forces have managed to expand their zone of control and fully regain control of the village of Pyatikaki. According to some publications and testimonies, on the presented footage one can see a group of AFU soldiers who decided to surrender after fighting in the area. There is also information about the advance towards Mali Sherbaki and Sherbaki. It is still difficult to understand what exactly is happening. Either the Russian army is gradually increasing the pace of the offensive in order to reach Zaporizhia, or the Russian side is taking tactical actions in case of a possible offensive of the AFU in order to win a few hours of fighting in the gray zone. As for regrouping and bringing in reinforcements, today we received interesting images from the north of Ukraine, from the northern part of Sumy region. Back at night, there were numerous reports in various telegram channels about the possible threat of ballistic strikes. Apparently, the launches were recorded, and the information was transmitted in time to those concerned so that people had time to hide in bunkers or other shelters. Closer to morning, objective control footage was released. They show another group of Ukrainian armed forces FPV drone operators unloading equipment somewhere in the northern part of the Bryansk region. Note the number of boxes with drones. The AFU tried to hide them, cover them with special material so that they could not be traced. However, the Ukrainian soldiers had no idea that they were already under surveillance and their coordinates were passed to the competent authorities. At the same moment, an Iskander with a cluster warhead struck the AFU accumulation with a large number of drones. After such a strike it is almost impossible to survive. You can pay attention to the traces of shrapnel and the radius of impact. The probability that anyone survived is extremely low. The casualties are very high. It is surprising that this defeat happened here. Perhaps the Ukrainian armed forces were preparing to strike deep into the territory of the Russian Federation, or the Ukrainian side was trying to organize some kind of offensive fist to attack in the Bryansk region and thereby slow down the advance of Russian units in the Kursk region, in particular on the Sudzansky salient.